Hi, I'm Andy with the San Juan Soil and Water Conservation District in northwest New Mexico. In this backyard conservation workshop, we'll be looking at rainwater harvesting and low-impact development you can use in your own backyard to capture rainwater where it falls. These techniques are excellent for the American Southwest. Here in northwest New Mexico, we typically get between 4 and 12 inches of rain per year, averaging around 8. Obviously, that is very, very little water, so we need to utilize every little bit of rain that falls and make sure that we don't waste it. Not only can low-impact development and rainwater harvesting increase the amount of water you get in your own yard and help increase the productivity of your yard or garden, but it will also help the environment downstream by reducing the amount of bacteria that could be flowing into the rivers and help prevent erosion. Typically, in urban and developed environments, water quality and quantity is a big issue. In the past, when we've designed cities or developed areas, we typically try to shed the water as quickly away as possible, reducing the amount of infiltration. However, when we're piping that water away from the city, we're getting rid of our precious resource that we need and reducing the amount of water we can then use within the city. Not only that, but runoff that goes into storm drains is typically not filtered. This means that pesticides, fertilizers, oils, salts, and animal waste can all go straight into our riverways, which is usually our drinking water. Instead, we should really be looking at how we can turn stormwater into an asset. And one of the best ways to do this is through low-impact development, or basically re-landscaping to capture and utilize the rainwater on site, preventing it from needing to go into storm drains and be sent off downstream in the rivers. Now, with planning and engineering, we can encourage the stormwater to stay on site or close to where it falls, and we can encourage infiltration, filtration of the water, and reduced runoff. But the first and most important thing to increasing infiltration is decreasing impervious surfaces. The amount of concrete and cement that we have in our urban areas and developed cities reduces so much of our land's ability to drink up or soak in or infiltrate that water that lands on it. So we need to take away those impervious surfaces so that the water can actually get down into the earth where it's needed. And it doesn't have to be some big project. It can be a simple one as long as the water can get to the surface of the earth. Now, bioretention systems are an excellent example of a low-impact development. They are one of the more complicated or costly methods because you actually dig out the whole area, then you replace the soil with material that allows the water to infiltrate deeper and faster. While bioretention systems provide a great place for plants to grow and can be fine-tuned to provide growing conditions for particular plants or garden plants that you want to grow, they are quite expensive and they can't handle the types of depth that would allow a lot of infiltration. To show you kind of a side cut of what we're looking at, the water would go down into the bioretention system where you have mulch on the surface, something that would be easily permeable. It then goes through the bioretention soil media, and then at the bottom is an under-drain pipe which allows the water to be dispersed further underground. A simpler and less expensive method would be an infiltration trench. You just build it straight onto the surface of the ground, obviously dig a little bit of a trench, and then fill it with rock and some plants, and it will slow down the water, allowing some of the water to infiltrate down into the ground, and it also slows down the water so you don't get as much erosion. Now, this here is not going to be as effective as a bioretention basin, but it's going to still be better than concrete or cement. Bioswales are similar to an infiltration trench, however you're using plants instead of just a bunch of rock to slow down the water. The plants will then also help filter out sediment and pollutants and also can pull up more of the water that's going down through the bioswale. For a little example of a side cut, you basically have your original soil on the bottom. You can either rip up some top surface soil for the plants to be able to grow in, or you can add soil amendments if you want to have a more productive garden or plant growth in a bioswale. And then you just have rock on the surface to prevent evaporation, and basically as a type of mulch. Because you are going to have water flowing through the bioswale, you typically don't want like bark mulch that would float and basically make a mess when it does fill with water. Here's an example of a bioswale, and they are great for places with limited infiltration, and they're more aesthetic than an infiltration trench. And they do provide some biochemical aid or water purification through the process of the water infiltration. However, they often have steep sides near them since they are in a ditch or trench, which needs to be have erosion prevention done to it. You can do that with either stabilization from plants, though they do need to become established before it erodes. You can also use rock or other types of slope retention media. Now, one option for low impact development, if you have a lot of water that you need to get rid of quickly in an area, is a dry well. Instead of pulling water up from underground, we basically allow the water to quickly infiltrate underground. Basically, a dry well, you dig a deep hole, making sure that you stay at a minimum of 10 feet away from the groundwater. So if you have very close groundwater, a dry well is not an option for you. You need to make sure that the water going in can infiltrate through at least 10 feet of ground before it touches groundwater. So you dig a hole, fill it with gravel to allow infiltration, and you have a PVC pipe going down through that gravel. Then you have a settling chamber or catchment kind of chamber that will fill up and allow the sand and silt to settle out. And then at the top of that chamber, right here, is actually where the water is going to flow in to this piped system. So you're going to need a debris screen so you prevent sand, silt, and debris from going down into your infiltration area. But you also are going to need to clean out the settling chamber every once in a while, because once that fills up with sediment, you'll have that sediment going down into your system and the whole thing will be ruined. So obviously some advantages: it can quickly get rid of water if in an area where there's a lot of standing surface water. It's relatively cheap and easy to install. However, you do need to clean out that pre-treatment or settling chamber area regularly. And the water that's going deeper underground will not be accessible to the plants near the surface. However, if you do have trees in the area, then it can be beneficial to them if their roots are nearby. Also, depending on how big of a settling chamber or container you're using, there is obviously a safety hazard for horses, dogs, kids, and whatnot, because this is essentially an open pool of water until it fills up to this level. Then it flows in. So it will always be staying filled with water. One of my favorite types of low impact development is permeable paving. It's essentially using gravel or cinder blocks or open cell concrete to create a driveway that doesn't get driven on a lot typically, so typically a driveway, to basically have infiltration in between each of the bricks or blocks or between the stones. Obviously, the advantage is that it promotes infiltration without sacrificing the usefulness of the previous space. Downsides: it can be expensive, and you may need to weed it if it becomes weedy. There are some ways to reduce the amount of weeds that come up. Obviously, you can use gravel in between instead of dirt to prevent weeds, and it can look very aesthetically pleasing. In fact, permeable paving is a very common type of driveway in Europe. So now on to rain barrels and rainwater harvesting. Now, before you set up a rain barrel or rainwater harvesting system like this, you're going to need to first calculate how much rainwater you can capture from your surface. Now, rain barrels are typically 50 to 55 gallons per barrel, and you need to then calculate how much surface area you have on your roof that will be draining into the rain barrels, so you can know how much rain you could potentially capture. Also, you should be considering how much rain you typically get in your area. Here in northwest New Mexico, I've generally found that we get rain, if we get a good little thunderstorm, between 0.1 and 0.2 inches of rain per rain cycle or per rain period. So I can capture typically between 300 and 400 gallons of water from one little rainstorm. So I have the appropriate number of rain barrels spread out around the outside of the house to capture that amount of water. Now, for rain barrels, how to hook them into a system, there's a few different ways to do this. You could simply use your hose spigot, hook up a hose, and just water things by hand with a hose. That system is effective, but the downside is that you can only water stuff that is pretty nearby. The further away you go, the less water pressure or gravity-fed water pressure there is, and the less effective it is to hand water. Also, you can't water anything that's higher than the level of the bottom of the barrel, or at least the level of the water in the barrel. So just things to consider if you're going to be watering by hand. The method I have gone with is actually hooking it up to a low pressure PVC pipe system. So this pipe here is going into a PVC pipe system that we have all the way around our house. And on the left side here you can see another system. This closer one is going into the PVC pipe system you can see running at the base of the house. This other one is going to go water this trumpet vine over here. So once you have it into a PVC system and you're running that piping across your whole around your house, you can connect all of your rain barrels to the same system. This also comes along this side of the house. Here you can see it's going underneath this mat and all the way up to our chicken coop. Now, we don't use rainwater for our chicken coop for the rain barrel up there. However, I use the same watering system to get water up to their watering barrel. So not only do I have this whole system hooked into our rain barrels, I also have it hooked up to our hose spigot or municipal water system. So that if we don't have rain in our rain barrels, I can still water everything using the same low pressure system. Now, to clarify what I mean by a low pressure or high pressure system, this system, if you turn it on, requires an outlet because all of these PVC joints are just connected together. None of them are glued together. If you glue them together, then you have to worry about freezing and rupturing in the winter and then repairing it in the spring. Instead, by leaving them unglued, then you allow the joints to just pop apart if it starts freezing, which protects the joints and the pipe from rupturing or breaking. It's an easy way to have a low pressure system. Also, for this low pressure PVC system, I use 3/4 inch PVC pipe. That is the thinner version. There's two types if you go to a hardware store like Lowe's or Home Depot. And if you ask for the contractor 3/4 inch PVC pipe, it's a thinner wall than the thick wall PVC pipe. It's much cheaper if you buy 100 feet at a time, so 10-foot pieces. Last time I got some, it was $1.13 per 10 feet. And because it's sectional and you're not gluing any of the joints together, if something does break, it's really cheap to replace and fix as you go. Not having to replace soaker hoses and deal with sediment buildup or anything like that. So, for this system, you can see an example here where I have drilled small holes with the smallest drill bit I could find. I believe this was a 1/32 inch tiny little drill bit. Drilled holes along the pipe, and it then feeds water. This is kind of similar to a soaker hose where you have the hose going down the middle and the plants on either side. Here's the other side of the garden that you can see where we have the soaker hose or the PVC pipe with little holes providing water just to where the plants need it. Now keep in mind that amount of water pressure you see there is just from having the rain barrels open. Because we have 6 rain barrels all feeding water to this area, when all of them are open, it provides a lot of head pressure or gravity-fed pressure to really pump out the water through the system. How I do this, typically start in one rain barrel, open up the valve, walk to the next one, open it up, go around the house doing that. By the time I get back to the first rain barrel, it's about time to stop watering, close that one up, and do the same thing going back around. So to finish off, I wanted to touch on catchment basins. These are one of the easiest or simplest methods for low impact development to encourage infiltration and rainwater use. Essentially, you slope the land towards a basin that will fill with water and allow the water to infiltrate, and have plants in there to be able to filter and also use the water that's going into the catchment basin. It's relatively inexpensive to set up. However, it can have poor drainage depending on what the subsoil is like. If you're above bedrock, it might not have as good drainage. Also, you might get a lot of sediment flowing in if the flooding water or the runoff water that goes into this catchment basin has a lot of sand and silt in it. So the example of this that I'd like to show is San Juan Nursery in Farmington, New Mexico. The street behind their store would always flood with just the littlest bit of rain. And this was just an example of what it looked like from just a small thunderstorm that went by. So this is obviously a problem. And it's a problem because there's no way for the water to reach the earth and to actually infiltrate. So we worked together with San Juan Nursery and the city of Farmington to cut out a side of the road. Being it was a small residential street, there was room to convert some of it into a catchment basin. We then dug a trench or basically dug a basin to allow water to fill in and stand there while it infiltrated. And we loosened the soil to allow the plants to be able to grow better as opposed to just hard compacted dirt that was underneath the road. We did add some nutrients to the soil and seeded it with native grasses and also planted native plants. And this was the catchment basin after we finished the project a couple weeks later. So nothing had really grown yet, and this was the next rain. Typically, the amount of little thunderstorm that had gone by would have flooded the whole road again, but all of the water infiltrated into the catchment basin and prevented the street from flooding. Just from removing the impervious surface and adding some natural soil for the earth or for the water to infiltrate down into. This here was about 4 or 5 months later. The native grasses had come up. The plants that we planted were mostly doing well, and you could see that it was still, holding on strong. Over here, we had noticed that there was a couple spots where the water was coming in too quick and was causing erosion. So we added some boulders or cobbles to slow down the water as it entered the catchment basin, thereby reducing the amount of erosion. We believe after this point added a couple more right in here as the water started to funnel into this little spot. We filled that in with cobbles to prevent further erosion. So thank you for watching our Backyard Conservation Workshop video on rainwater harvesting and low impact development. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us through our website at sanjuanswcd.com. Thank you.